What if you could watch a film that was as authentic a snapshot of history as possible? One that depicted life hundreds of years ago, as if someone had literally taken a video camera back in time and teleported the footage into the future for you to watch. Where all costumes, props, and even the languages are painstakingly made in the style at the time, with the use of traditional knowledge passed down through generations. Well, the good news is that you can. It's called Atanarjuat, The Fast Runner. Released in 2001 and directed by Zacharias Kunuk, The Fast Runner is a 3-hour-long epic film. It's won a ton of awards worldwide, 6 in Canada and 19 internationally, including the prestigious Camera d'Or Award at the 2002 Cannes Film Festival. And it was the first film to be written, directed, and acted entirely in Inuktitut. The Fast Runner is hailed as the top Canadian film of all time by the Toronto International Film Festival, and it also has the #1 spot on a CBC list of the 50 greatest films directed by Canadians. So what makes this film such a big deal?
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Well, we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about it a lot. Seriously, I had to stop myself from going on a million side quests when researching this. We are doing a deep dive. Hi, I'm back, and I am unsettled. I make research videos on unsettling things. My last video essay was about the high Arctic relocation, so check that out if you're interested. Essentially, the Canadian government forcibly relocated Inuit multiple times, with the most dramatic and well-documented relocation taking place in 1953. And as the government does, they didn't plan this all out very well, and they were super racist about the whole thing, and a lot of Inuit suffered for it. And if you're looking for an introduction as to who Inuit are, where the Arctic is, and some context along those lines, I also encourage you to watch either the relocation video or my sled dog massacre video, because I provide a lot more historical background detail and context than I will here. So this video is going to be a little different than my other video essays. I'm going to do a video analysis of The Fast Runner, its production, the legend that the story came from, the reception, all of it. But first, my positionality, because I forgot to do that in my last video. I forgot to do any kind of intro at all, which is a shame because I like making basic white girl jokes at the expense of myself. Anyways, I'm not Indigenous, I just like to research. So I'm going to do my best, and also please forgive me if I'm bad at pronouncing Inuktitut words. I'm trying my best. I do have a bit of a research background in Indigenous issues, but I'm still learning, and I like making these videos as an opportunity to learn more. Also, spoilers, if you haven't seen the movie, I'll be spoiling all of it. I highly recommend watching it first. It is on Canadian Netflix. So, The Fast Runner is set in the pre-colonial past, telling an Inuit legend that has been passed down by oral tradition. I'll give a brief overview of the plot, so we know what we're talking about right away, but we're going to dive deeper into the details once I set up all the context. Because if there's one thing we do on this channel, it's spend like half an hour on context before we even get to the video topic. So, The Fast Runner centers around a guy named Atanarjuat in the village of Igloolik in modern-day Nunavut. One day, a mysterious shaman comes to the village and upsets the natural balance of the community, and that results in the death of the leader. Years later, tensions arise in the village. The two best hunters in the village are the brothers Amakjuak, the strong one, played by Pekakanuksuk, and Atanarjuat, the fast runner, played by Natar-Ungulak. The new chief's son Oki, played by Peter Henry Arnatsiak, is jealous of the brothers, and Atanarjuat wins the hand of Oki's promised wife, Atuat, played by Sylvia Ivalu. These tensions boil over, and Oki and his friends try and kill the brothers in their sleep. Amakjuak is killed, but Atanarjuat escapes. He runs naked for his life, barefoot across the sea ice, until he collapses, and he's found by a kind family who nurses him back to health. When he's ready, he goes back to Igloolik to avenge his brother's death and restore balance to his community. And I didn't even mention Pooja and how she plays into all this. We'll talk about her later too. So yeah, a historical epic if there ever was one. The National Film Board of Canada reviewed the film as follows. Many enthusiastic viewers have compared this epic story to the Iliad. In the words of one movie critic, if Homer had been given a video camera this is what he would have done. Director Zacharias Kunuk describes it as a powerful drama, not a documentary, and that it demystifies the exotic, otherworldly Aboriginal stereotype by telling a universal story. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. First, a note about sources, because this movie was so groundbreaking that there were multiple books and academic studies written about it. Most notably, there is a book called The Fast Runner, Filming the Legend of Atanarjuat, written by Mark Robert Evans, that I found super helpful. No, not that writer Robert Evans, even though I am a big fan of his podcast. But in this book, Mark Robert Evans has the ability to talk to Kunuk and the other creators of the film, so I learned a lot about its production, as well as the history of the production company ISUMA Productions, which we'll talk about in a bit. So first, let's talk about Igloolik. Igloolik is actually a community located on a small island between Baffin Island and the Nunavut mainland. The first European ships reached Igloolik in 1822, captained by William Edward Parry, while he was looking for the Northwest Passage.
The Northwest Passage!
And it was also probably visited by the infamous Franklin expedition. They likely made it beyond Igloolik before their ships got stuck. And I have a whole side tangent about the Franklin expedition in my last video. It's kind of my Roman Empire. Igloolik is the setting of the Fast Runner because that's where the legend comes from. That's where the story takes place.
That's probably one of the best story in our region, which we put it on the film. And it makes me very proud that we can pass our story from through tongue, then through films, which is very good for us to be involved.
And it's a community of people today still. It currently has a population of about 2,000 people. And Inuit from Igloolik call themselves Igloolik. Imagine living in a place where there's a legend that's been passed down, and that happened right in the place where you still live. In Michael Robert Evans's book, he talks about how there's this rectangular stone at the bay near the community that you can go sit on to look out over the bay. And part of the Atanarjuat legend is that Atanarjuat would come and sit on this specific rock to watch for the whales that he had hunted to drift onto the shore. So you can go sit on the rock and be like, yep, the legend sat here too. And another interesting fact is that the island of Igloolik is actually rising. So because when the land was covered by glaciers during the last ice age, it was really compressed. And then when the glaciers receded, the land has been slowly springing back up. And it's done that so much so that the rock that was supposed to be pretty close to the shore of the bay during Atanarjuat's time, which was probably about 500 or so years ago, it's now about 500 feet back from the shoreline. So that's how much the island has risen. And there's also a research center in Igloolik that works on documenting Inuit traditional knowledge as well as climate research. There's facilities there for researchers doing all kinds of fieldwork in the area. And when I was looking on Google Maps, I went to see if there was Google Street View in Igloolik, and there's only one pin drop, and it's right in the research center. So this is what you see when you look at Street View in the research center. Hi guys, nice to see ya. Hope you're doing well now. Igloolik is the home of Zacharias Kunuk, the director of The Fast Runner and a founding member of ISUMA Productions. Dr. Zacharias Kunuk, OC, Order of Canada, was born in 1957 in Baffin Island, and he had a traditional upbringing. He lived in a sod house when he was young. He's lived in the Igloolik area for pretty much his whole life. He was taken from his family as a boy and enrolled in a boarding school, which he didn't have a good experience at. I don't know if he considers the school the same as like the residential schools that were common across Canada at the time and the legacy that they left, because I never heard it referred to as a residential school in my sources, only as a boarding school or a government school. But it seems to have a similar traumatic legacy for Kunuk, because he talks about arriving at the school not knowing English because his first language is Inuktitut, and the nuns would beat him when he spoke Inuktitut. So that resulted in him just not talking a lot. He said he did like watching movies at the school gym and also in Igloolik's community hall.
For me, it's great because when I came to Igloolik in the 60s, I went to our little community hall where they watch movies, cowboys and Indians, and I thought it was God sent. Never knew there were cameras here and there, and so many people work behind the camera. I didn't even know that.
When he left school, he was reunited with his family in Igloolik, and he got really good at carving sculptures. And these traditional sculptures that he carved could be sold in the South for a lot of money. They were like high-skilled artisanal crafts. So in 1981, he took his carvings down to Montreal. He sold them. He bought video equipment, including like a camera and a television. And so he kind of started teaching himself how to use the equipment. And when the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation opened a production center in Igloolik, Kunuk joined them as a videographer and producer, and then later as a manager. So again, a lot of the technical stuff he figured out on his own. As part of the IBC training, he took a 2-week-long videography course in Iqaluit. And that was where he met Norman Cohn, who was the instructor of the course. He continued working with Cohn, learning more about videography skills from him, and Norman became another founding member of ISUMA Productions. So Norman Cohn was born in 1946 in New York City, and he's the only non-Inuit founding member of ISUMA Productions. He immigrated to Canada and became a Canadian citizen in 1981. He met Kunuk when teaching a videography course in Iqaluit, and then he traveled to Igloolik in 1985 to meet Kunuk again after seeing videos that he made when working for the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation. Cohn has a background in experimental film, and he brought this expertise along with his technical filming expertise to ISUMA. The third founding member of ISUMA was Paul Apak, born in 1954 near Igloolik. He had a background as a hunter, dog tamer, and photographer. He joined the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation in 1981, working with Zacharias Kunuk, and he wrote the story and a Nanook screenplay for The Fast Runner, based on interviews with local elders. And unfortunately, he passed away from cancer in 1998 before the film was completed. The fourth and final founding member of ISUMA was Pauloosie Qulitalik, who was born in 1939 on Baffin Island. He also worked for the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation, and as a co-founder of ISUMA, he oversaw the cultural authenticity of every production, and he played acting roles in a lot of ISUMA production films as well. So, for example, in The Fast Runner, he plays the character of Qulitalik the shaman. So, back to how ISUMA actually started. So, after working at the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation for 6 years, Kunuk left because he didn't like their southern approach to work. So the IBC had really structured Western approaches to the work environment of like showing up at 9 and leaving at 5, and you had to work for the designated time being on the clock. And Kunuk was more accustomed to the Inuit style of following your own natural productivity rhythms. So if it's like a nice day for fishing, you should be able to just go fishing for the day instead of having to be at work. If the weather is bad and traveling is dangerous, you should be free to stay home. So, that makes a lot of sense to me. I kind of think we as a society have been brainwashed into thinking the 9-to-5 hustle is normal.
You're relieved you don't have to go to work because you thought you were going to get eaten? What the fuck is this world? What have they done to us? What did they do to us?
And if you think Kunuk is lazy, I implore you to look at his extensive list of projects over his career. So that would suggest that he is anything but lazy. So I think he's on to something, and maybe our society needs to change, but that's a whole other tangent that I don't have time to delve into in this video. So a lot of ISUMA production projects you can watch for free at www.isuma.tv. And generally you can't watch the feature films here, but all the documentaries and series and things like that you can watch. It's where I watched the documentary Exile, which I used as a source in my last video about the high Arctic relocation. So how did The Fast Runner start? How did it become a film? Well, there's been a lot of depictions of Indigenous peoples in film up till this point, and a few included Inuit depictions, and most of these depictions were not good. So trigger warning for some racist-ass bullshit. So most media about Indigenous peoples have been made by white people from a white perspective. Some of the worst depictions were of people as primitive, savage, silly, ranging to the noble savage trope, or just being non-existent, suggesting that Indigenous peoples existed historically but they're just not around anymore. If you want a really good analysis of depictions of Indigenous peoples in film, I highly recommend the Lindsay Ellis video, Pocahontas Was a Mistake, and here's why.
And our heroine is okay, yeah, that sounds legit. Turns out she has this treasure-obsessed antagonist who's really obsessed with being shiny. So she gets in a boat and goes out to meet her destiny. And after some trials and tribulations and hanging out with some guy who is pretty disrespectful to her team.
Just mwah, so good. She also has an interesting point on the film Brother Bear.
But with the way it mixes native language with a European style of music. YouTuber Sideways did a great video essay entitled How Disney Uses Language. This essay has a little segment about Brother Bear and its use of Inupiat language with Bulgarian women's choir music because it sounds vaguely, ethnic.
So they used music that most people hadn't heard of, that had nothing to do with the context of the film, in order to make the scene sound, more magical?
Point here being that Brother Bear kind of took a step back and got away with it because most people couldn't tell the difference between a Bulgarian women's choir and Inupiat music. Both are presumed to sound equally alien.
So even though Brother Bear uses Bulgarian music to try and convey an Alaskan sound, which, alright, they were actually on the right track by using the native language.
She touches on the Disney mixing of cultures without regard for authenticity by using the example of Brother Bear, which tells a story of Inupiat in pre-colonial Alaska. And just as a side note, weirdly enough, The Fast Runner also uses Bulgarian choral music. It came out before Brother Bear. I just saw this in the credits. So maybe there's a more solid connection there as to why Kunuk chose to use this music specifically. I couldn't find anything online about the music choices, so I just thought that was neat. And also, I'm pretty sure there's also didgeridoos used in some parts of the film. So I don't see the issues of mixing music from different cultures to capture the feel of what you're going for in an Inuit film, given that whoever is making the decisions to do this is Nanook. But essentially most depictions of indigenous peoples in film historically, they haven't been informed, they haven't been accurate, and most importantly, they haven't been created by indigenous peoples. And these depictions are also usually set in the past, which gives the impression that indigenous people only existed historically and that they've disappeared with time, which isn't true. But that's changing in recent years.
Abnormal.
Y'all wouldn't have seen a stolen food truck, would you?
No.
Oh. Someone stole the truck. Broad daylight.
Put your seatbelt on. Seatbelt.
People's safety.
We're stealing a f***ing chip truck.
I do not give a shit, man. Put your seatbelt on. We're not doing this.
But at the time, in the 1990s and early 2000s, the film landscape wasn't great. So for a long time, the main depiction of Inuit that most people outside of the Arctic were familiar with was Nanook of the North. So this is a film that was released in 1922 and directed by Robert Flaherty. And Flaherty wasn't actually a filmmaker by trade before this, he was a mining specialist. It was filmed in Nunavik on the Ungava Peninsula in northern Quebec, and it claims to be a documentary of an Inuk named Nanook and his family as they go about their lives. And the film didn't really permit much indigenous agency. Although the film depicts itself as an authentic look at the lives of Inuit, it was heavily manipulated to fit the narrative that the Europeans filming it wanted to give. I find the tagline of "a story of life and love in the actual Arctic" to be a bit ironic. So for example, the main character Nanook is depicted as a spear hunter, even though in reality the actor who played him had owned and used a rifle for years. And the actor's name wasn't Nanook, it was ʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔʔ there's a scene where Nanook is shown a phonograph, and he doesn't know what it is, which I guess, like, fair enough. But then he picks it up and bites it, which, like, come on, really? Zacharias Kunuk mentions this scene in particular as showing Inuit as primitive and childlike, and he says it partly inspired him to present a more authentic look at Inuit life without the stereotypes and the insults. And for context, this scene was entirely scripted anyway, and Alakarialak knew what a phonograph was. Also, the two women shown in the film playing the characters of Nanook's wives weren't actually his wives. The woman who played the character of Nyla, the actress's name is Alice Nuvalinga. Flaherty actually had an affair with her. He was married to someone else at the time. And then a few months after Flaherty left, Alice gave birth to a son named Josephie. And because Flaherty is presumably a jackass, he never acknowledged his child with Alex. And because everything is connected, Josephie was actually one of the Inuit who was relocated from Inuktitut to Grise Fiord. And Josephie's daughter, Martha, who was 5 years old at the time her family was relocated, is now an Inuit cultural educator. And there's actually a documentary about her called Martha of the North. Anyways, this is the cultural context that we're working in when we're talking about historical depictions of Inuit in the media. So, like, most people in Canada and elsewhere aren't from the Arctic, and most people haven't even been there. So, media is really important in communicating what it's like. So, it's important that that media be authentic. And how can a film about Inuit be authentic unless it is made by Inuit? In an interview with the CBC, Kunuk talks about how the camera is a perfect tool for oral history.
So we come from oral history. The camera is exactly the perfect tool for this. It is.
Because it can just capture...
You just talk. You just act. Because that's what we learned when we were children. We're watching our father tie up the sled, how he ties it, how he harnessed the dogs, and we're trying it out ourselves. I grew up to that world, so I want that preserved.
So he set out to make a real movie about Inuit, and a quote from him says, "We show how our ancestors dressed, how they handled their dog teams, how they argued and laughed, confronted evil, and fought back." So ISUMA Productions depends on grants. They expand when funding comes in, and they contract when a project ends, and they have to apply for another funding grant. The funds from granting agencies also don't flow smoothly. They require forging relationships with granting organizations, understanding requirements for application procedures, and submitting successful applications to bring in the funds necessary to complete a film. So Zacharias Kunuk needed funding for his movie, and he had to fight to keep his vision.
It was almost impossible to make a film if you're Aboriginal. And that's what we ran into. We never knew that this exists. That if you had a bright idea, anybody could propose for funding, get funding, and do it. In that time, it was not like that, probably for a long time. And we changed that. They also want our actors to speak English. And I had a good argument with that because I've seen Kung Fu movies. And I thought, maybe that's what it's going to look like, a Kung Fu movie. And I didn't want that.
ISUMA Productions secured funding from the National Film Board of Canada and had an approved budget of $1.96 million. And I did find a source that said $1.5 million of that budget was put right back into the Igloolik economy through mostly hiring people, which is pretty amazing. Another great thing about ISUMA Productions is that they employ local people. In a lot of very northern remote communities like Igloolik, there aren't a lot of opportunities to participate in the wage economy. There's generally a few government positions, some municipal service jobs, a few hourly openings at local stores, and that's about it. So a lot of people live on government assistance, which is not a lot. It's just enough to cover basic needs generally and not much else. So when ISUMA Productions is filming something in the community, they need to hire actors, they need to hire costumers, makeup artists, set and prop builders, dog team wranglers, and a whole other host of positions. And that provides jobs for a lot of people in the community while the film is in production. And the extra money that people make is able to go towards improving their lives, such as fixing up their homes and buying new clothes, which generally is not in their budget from just receiving government assistance. And the production of The Fast Runner is pretty amazing because, so the film is set about 500 years ago. I've had mixed messages in my sources on the timing. Some say 1,000 years ago. So everything used in the film was made by Inuit artisans in accordance with traditional methods. So this includes everything that you see: clothes, spears, kayaks, sunglasses, and dwellings. These were all painstakingly researched and recreated to be authentic to the time period. And the people making these things were all local people from Igloolik. The women actors even had facial tattoos, which they would have had at the time and which are still very common in many Inuit communities today.
Tattoo was just left when Christianity came. And when we're doing a film way past Christianity, of course, every woman will have tattoos. It was a way of life. They were tattooed when they were children. We all grew up with this story. You can actually go to places where this story happens. We're passing this story on from oral history to a motion picture film. And we wanted to do it for our Inuit audience because there was not too many films about Inuit. We had to do it right. The dialogue is right, the costume is right. What research we did was we went back to the earliest known records of this island. We saw the sketches of how Inuit dressed, and when we hired 7 women to sew, their method of measuring was still all technology. I mean, they were using strings to measure our actors.
So when writing the screenplay, the filmmakers collected 8 variants of the Atanarjuat legend from Igloolik elders. The elders were telling the story as it had been passed down to them for generations. And when you're talking about oral traditions, there's really no official version of a story because obviously things change when you pass them down from person to person over time. And in the film, not only are they speaking Inuktitut, they are speaking an ancient form of Inuktitut. All of the actors who were already fluent in modern Inuktitut spent hours learning this older version of the language from elders. Paul Apak quotes, "We go to the elders and ask information about the old ways, about religion, about things that a lot of people have no remembrance of now. They are helping us write down what people would have said and acted in the past, and what the dialogue would have been like. We speak baby talk compared to the elders. But for Atanarjuat, we want people speaking real Inuktitut." So the film was shot over 6 months, and it was shot entirely on HD, which was rare at the time, but it was necessary for the filming because of the cold temperatures. Because remember, they were filming on location in Igloolik.
You make films the way you go seal hunting, which is you get a bunch of people together, they cooperate because you can't get a seal by yourself. Somebody catches it, but it doesn't matter who. You all share it and take the meat home. There are environmental limits to what you can do in the Arctic. If you shoot anywhere from, let's say, the 1st of April to 15th of December, your equipment will work fine. There will be times when you're really cold and the equipment's really cold because it can be minus 30. When it's colder than minus 30, things don't work. Cables snap because like dry spaghetti. Cameras freeze. So our parameters are fixed. We have to make it the way it is. So our guy is really running on the ice. He's really naked. He falls in the real water. And yes, he's really cold. And we're running along with him because that's the only way to do it.
So they had to work with the seasons and make sure when they were filming it wasn't too cold. Also, for part of the year, the region has 24-hour daylight since it's above the Arctic Circle, so they incorporated that into their shooting schedule as well. So for some parts of the year, they could shoot round the clock if they needed to. So when we go through the film together, just picture people running around with cameras on sleds and cameras and boats, and just try and think about how they got all these beautiful shots of the high Arctic. Okay, so let's just start. So the film opens with dogs howling on an Arctic landscape. We can hear the crunch of the snow with the footsteps, so that's how you know that it's cold. So this is Qulitalik and his sister Panapak. Qulitalik is leaving the village, and we are about to find out why. So, through Panapak's flashback sequence, we see an evil shaman enter the community. He duels with Qulitalik, who is Panapak's husband, and also the leader of the community. And the shaman kills him. The leader's necklace of walrus bones is given to Qulitalik and Panapak's son, Sari. Okay, so I realized this already might be a bit confusing, so I made a family tree in Canva. So here we are so far. I'll keep coming back to this and updating it as we go along. So we got Qulitalik and his sister Panapak, and she's married to Qulitalik, and they have a son, Sari. And there's the evil shaman, who is not related to anyone else in the story that I know of. So he kills Qulitalik, and Sari is now the new leader. And one thing I noticed at this point in the film is that the soundtrack is really cool. So like I mentioned earlier, it sounds like didgeridoos here. In one of the sources that I read, Zacharias Kunuk did mention spending some time in the Australian outback to learn about the Aboriginal videography projects that they were doing there. But other than that, I couldn't find out much more about the possible inspiration for the music used in the film. It'd be really cool to learn more, though. So anyway, we flash ahead a couple of years and we meet Qulitalik. Qulitalik is having a hard time. He's really been struggling with hunting and having some bad luck. Other people on the hunting trip are taunting him, and we later find out it's Sari and his sidekicks. We meet Qulitilik's wife, Pitaluk, and their two sons. The older one is Amakjuak, and the baby is Atanarjuat. So we pause for a quick addition to our family tree. Okay, there we are. Anyway, the rest of the hunting party has some frozen seals, and they don't seem too concerned about Qulitilik's family's well-being or sharing their food with them.
Udang piyo natin nino. Aso ko. Sabi na yung kalak sa kong takulog ito. Kanito ko lang tungal ka yun nang itiya makilakpong.
So here we see a nice close-up of some facial tattoos. So although men sometimes got traditional tattoos, by far they were and are more common among Inuit women. Facial tattoos generally mark a woman's transition into adulthood, and they carry unique symbolic meaning for each individual person. Facial tattoos were discouraged and persecuted by Christian missionaries after European contact because, by my understanding, Christian missionaries are against all things cool and fun. But in modern times, they've seen a revival, which is great because they're a really important part of Inuit culture.
Senior ko tiga na ongila nagligisak pagin. Yung nino nakaksikuro lang. Atanarjuat katun iki.
So we cut to the tent. They're still making fun of Tulimak.
Tulimak, ang una suktiar. Kung siguro nga si piniak.
And we see Panapak in the corner kind of watching this all unfold. There's a lot of burping in this scene. Everybody's kind of laughing at Tulimak except for Panapak. She's not laughing. Afterwards, we go back to Tunamak and Igloolik, and they show them tending the fire. One of the criticisms of Atanarjuat is that it's too slow, and they show too many mundane things, but I think that those criticisms kind of miss the whole point of the film. I really like watching this stuff. It's supposed to show authentic Inuit life. Like, that's the point. What's the point if you don't show day-to-day stuff, if you want to tell a story? Like, don't you want to see how people make fire in a land with no trees for wood? Also, the lighting is beautiful. You see the firelight flickering up at their faces. Panapak comes in and secretly brings food for the two kids.
Uba, amat. Narikud. Ang nagkagpinaksik patik mitatik sa tinang ipadilara karokto. Amat siya. Nagkakurinere tito. Kamagitang inayakakang natin nagkakurin. Inuna.
Then we have another time jump. This one's a lot bigger. We see Amakjuak and Atanarjuat all grown up now. We learn why Amakjuak is called the strong one. I really like how you can see the frost in his hair and his beard. Then we meet Oki and his gang. Oki is Sari's son, and he has carried on the tradition of being a dick. So let's quick go to our family tree. We've got Oki, who's Sari's son, and Kumaglak and Panapak's grandson. There's also Oki's sidekicks, Patulak and Pakak, who aren't related to anyone that I know of, but I just kind of stuck them there so we know who they are. Oh, and do you like how I labeled all the bad guys as bad, and then I also color-coded them and everything? Anyway, they try to take the dog sled, but Amakjuak and Atanarjuat outwit them. And I think the costumes are really shown off in this scene. In particular, you can see Oki's snow goggles, which if you've ever been outside on a really sunny day and surrounded by open snow, you'll know why the snow goggles exist. The sun reflects off the snow and makes everything like extra bright around you in these landscapes, and you can actually get snow blindness from this. So snow goggles are an ingenious invention made generally out of either driftwood, bone, or antlers, and they're essentially like glasses with slits carved in them. It cuts down on the amount of light that your eyes are exposed to, but you can still see out of the slits. So kind of like sunglasses, but not with glass. Also, watching them run in the snow made me feel tired. Like, you can see the strain that it takes. Next, we see a game. The community is playing wolf tag, which is like regular tag, but with the twist of you have to have skin-to-skin contact to be it. So this sidetracks us into the topic of traditional Inuit games. From my research, Inuit games seem to play a dual role. They both keep up endurance and agility that is required if you're living in the Arctic environment, so like being able to keep up on a hunting trip and whatnot. And games are also important for recreation and relationship building.
Atanarjuat kisimi. Atuanin amauktaw yumagam. Amakuya nakangata. Ubinig sinasiri. Atanarjuat niya.
So we see wolf tag, and Atanarjuat catches a woman named Atuat. They seem really into each other. However, Oki is not happy about this because Atuat is supposed to marry him.
Ani, atuanin nanurek sa kung nekanoy madlinurek taris mangipio.
We also learn that Oki has a sister named Pooja. Let's take a quick detour to our family tree. So we've added Pooja, and we have Atuat just chilling out there for now. Oh, and spoiler, Pooja's kind of a baddie too. Also, I really like the hairstyles that we see here, particularly Pooja's. Then an argument ensues, and that kind of shows some tension that's developing. Next we see Panapak and Atuat preparing food. We get some really great close-up shots of the food prep. Panapak says that she doesn't want Atuat to marry Oki, her grandson, because him and his father are mean.
Okay, iling ita kong itakaro ka ISUMA tuwarong man. Yang utakay na atata minimalik tuwar. Okaw diyang nangitinaw man. Yung ituro na yutinaw mayang naring.
She says that ever since her husband, Kumaglak, was murdered, evil lives within both Oki and Sari. Next, we are back to Oki. He's mad because he's not as good of a hunter as Atanarjuat, and he also thinks Atanarjuat is stealing his promised wife, so he's like extra jelly. Meanwhile, Atanarjuat brings home a big sled full of meat and furs. Atanarjuat's father and mother are really happy.
Igloolik.
And Tulamak declares that they're going to have a feast. Oki's anger comes to a head, and him and Atanarjuat decide that they're going to have a head punching contest to decide who wins the hand of Atuat. And by head punching contest, I mean exactly what I said. So in preparation for the event, they need to build a big igloo for everybody. So we get some great footage of igloo building.
Hey, you 12. Ătaᓈᕐᔪಅਥ.
We see other preparations for the festivities, including tuning a drum,
Kasi you are look at the kind of the way.
and Amakchuak reveals to Atanarjuat that Oki threatened to kill him, so that's not good.
Okay, uwani unang misukto.
Kasi may ukaw sa karap. Kanok tayo man na iling ni ukakto.
Okay, sumang na ilisimaraka ang maudlumi. Uwani unat ni magtuaro ka man.
Ukak pa unat ting maglo na iling nun. Kano na yadak pidli? Okay, unat ting maglo na ukanik si maraka may kangatuin na pigi atuin na kaya karakto.
Isumaruging itakalo na yok.
Ivika parok si mangitut. Uwa nga rin. Okay, uwan niksangin sa makayaro. Aswila uwan niktukultigyan na sibo.
And there's a really sweet scene where Atuat comes into the igloo and she doesn't know where to sit because she doesn't want to sit with Oki, but if she sits with Atanarjuat, Oki will get mad. But Panapak saves the day and is like, come sit with me, so Atuat goes and sits with her. Anyway, the festivities start. You can see the steam from people's mouths when they're singing. And we see more Inuit games. These ones seem more focused on, like indoor stuff. We see throat singing. There's a finger pull game where you stick fingers in each other's mouths and try and pull each other over. And these types of games, rather than focusing on keeping your physical stats up, they're a lot of the time meant to keep the peace. So everyone is living in really close proximity to each other. And there's not a lot of room for shenanigans. It's a really harsh environment, so everyone has to get along for the whole group to survive. So Inuit traditionally would use games to avoid and diffuse conflicts. So you would use competitions and games to diffuse standoffs, to settle quarrels, and that way you could address smaller issues before they festered into bigger ones. And they're also just for fun too, and having fun is a great way to diffuse tension. We see them singing taunting songs to each other.
Aya, okay, litagyan na po si Jamotag. Sila ikotong erami, Maria, Maria. Ya, 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 ya. Aya, igluan umog-jok kikiwang mata. Igluan umog-jok kipi, Maria, Maria. Ya, 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 ya.
This is called Ivisit, and it's basically like roasting. Anyway, it's time for head punching, and we see Atanarjuat and Oki square off. They take turns punching each other in the head until one has to stop. Ooh, right in the temple. So Atanarjuat wins, but Saori basically says, I'm the boss, and I don't care who won. I declare that Atuat is going to marry Oki anyway. However, Panapak saves the day again when she declares that Oki will willingly give Atuat away to be Atanarjuat's wife. You know, to save face, even though we all know what happened. Anyway, we have another time jump. Atanarjuat and Atuat have been together a few years now. They have a son named Kumaglak, who is named after the original community leader, and Atuat is also heavily pregnant with a second child. So let's take a second to update our family tree. I don't know why I wrote little kid there. I think to differentiate between the two Kumaglaks. It was really late when I made this. So there's a really cool kayaking shot as we see Atanarjuat returning back from a hunting trip. So remember, everything that you see is made in the traditional way, including the kayak. Atuat goes to greet him, and they're just super cute together.
Hey, Nago. Ila are yukuro.
They talk about how they need to go caribou hunting, but Atuat can't go with Atanarjuat because she's too pregnant. So Atanarjuat needs another woman to go with him to tend the camp while he's out hunting. So he asks Pooja to go with him while he goes out hunting. So we skip ahead to the hunting trip. And I know this movie isn't supposed to be a documentary, but at times it does kind of feel like one. It feels like you're watching a snapshot of life in a time and in a place. So Pooja flirts with Atanarjuat. He doesn't seem super interested, but he also doesn't shut her down either. We have another scene by campfire light, which is really neat to watch. And then Pooja keeps being like, ooh, I'm so cold. How will I ever warm up? Ooh. And then somehow that works, and then they do it. So yeah. So we jump ahead, and Pooja is now a second wife and living with the family. So let's update the tree. And second wives weren't uncommon among Inuit at this time, from what I could tell. So just that, like, if you have multiple wives, you better be a good hunter because it's understood that you have to be able to feed everybody. So in a sense, having a second wife could be seen by others as almost like an arrogant thing, like, ooh, I'm such a great hunter, I can not only support one wife, but also two. And also marriage was less formal of a thing in this culture. You would simply just move in together and there wasn't like a formal ceremony or anything. So I was expecting Ătaᓈᕐᵝ to be like at least a little miffed about all this, but from what I can tell, she's not mad that Atanarjuat took a second wife. However, she is mad that Pooja is being lazy and not contributing to the household. So Pooja kind of walks around and is like, you clean up, I'm going to go take a walk. And then we also meet Amakjuak's wife, Igloolik, who is also pregnant. And these two pregnant ladies are not so happy that they have to do all the work while Pooja is off frolicking around. So you can see how this is a problem. Everybody's in one tent together, and everyone surviving depends on everyone getting along and doing their share to help out. And when one person doesn't do this, it disrupts the balance of the whole group and causes like tension. This isn't the end of Pooja's shit disturbing either, because while they're all asleep in the tent together, Pooja snuggles up to Amakjuak and he's like, okay, and just starts having sex with her. And Igloolik catches them because they're literally right beside her. And then everyone starts yelling and they wake the baby up. And I understand that Pooja is the shit disturbing factor here. She's the one causing all this trouble, but you know, both brothers didn't have to stick their dick in her. I don't know, but I digress. Anyway, Pooja runs off. She runs back to Sari's camp, who is her father, and she does this amazing fake crying thing. And lies and says Atanarjuat tried to kill her. And I gotta say, the actress does a great job of like the really fake sounding crying, like it's almost comical. Panapak is not fooled. But Oki is like, cool, a reason to kill Atanarjuat. I've been waiting for this. And him and his gang leave toward Atanarjuat's camp. So we cut back to Igloolik and Ătaᵈ discussing this tomfuckery.
ISUMA Puya inu kamarong. Wanik ISUMA karakter. Kasi aiga. Angayong ito nagligidlarog sunok sila kayawag siyam. Udlang udjaka kawigit pang nagtidlugay.
And Igloolik says she isn't mad at Amakjuak, she's just worried about the rift between the brothers caused by sleeping with his wife, and is worried about how they're all going to live together now. So yeah, this just shows how the primary concern is keeping the balance and living in harmony, and I totally couldn't do it. I would be so mad at my stupid husband. Anyway, we get this amazing scene. Pooja, she's just like stumbling towards them across the landscape, absolutely wailing. So she gets closer, she comes towards them. And essentially says, "I'm sorry I slept with both your husbands. I will never do it again." And they both just stare at her amazingly. But Pooja promises to do her share of the work, and so they all forgive her so that they can be a family again.
Pianik po. Mana mit piar lugu ilagi te kannererokta.
Atanarjuat and Amakjuat come back from hunting, and they're really angry to find Pooja there.
Ukakatiga na kaya budiona. Mami na kakaya. Akaw sa katiga na kaya. Mami atoko.
But Atuat calmly explains that they already made up with Pooja. Pooja said she's sorry and they're a family again. And holy shit, where would they be without these women in the group keeping the peace? Pooja makes a seemingly nice gesture of offering to stay behind so Atuat and Luriak can go egg picking, while Atanarjuat and Amakjuat sleep.
Kamagilugi. Peso yung vikuminak tuwin yung timedlo yung niuterluti. Pikisirak vikuminak siterlunilo. Kamaginak pagkaan orangi.
So remember, the days are really long this time of year. Sometimes, like, it might be the time of year where there's 24-hour days. They're talking about being really tired. So they undress and go to sleep in the tent. We see Pooja take a boot and place one to mark where each brother is sleeping on the outside of the tent. And we see Oki's gang approaching across the landscape as Pooja leaves. So this was obviously a setup the whole time. So Oki and gang run towards the tent. There's a shot of Atanarjuat rolling over in his sleep, so now he's slightly off from the boot marker. Oki's gang make it to the tent and they just start stabbing through it at the boot marker. We see a spear come back bloody, showing that he hit someone, and suddenly Oki is startled by a vision of his dead grandfather, Kumaglak. While he's distracted, Atanarjuat runs naked out of the tent. And I'm probably going to have to blur a lot of these scenes because there's a lot of flopping. Oki and gang chase him and they throw spears at him but miss. And note that Atanarjuat is running barefoot on the ice. And note that the actor, Natar Unglak, is in real life running barefoot naked on the ice. And remember that this is filmed on location in Igloolik in the high Arctic, and these are really long shots too. It was confirmed that this was all real in the interviews that I watched.
There's a famous scene, of course, where you have to run naked over the snow, barefoot. Talk to me about that scene.
Well, in my mind, nobody wanted to get that role naked in front of camera.
Right.
And I said to myself, if I have a chance, I'll play that role. I think that's the point that I pitch in perfectly to be as an Atanarjuat fast runner.
But you knew it was coming.
Yes. Because it was already there, so.
Right. So when you signed on, you were like, okay, that scene will happen. That's going to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So how do you prepare yourself?
Well, everything has to be prepared from scratch. Behind the scene, I remember I was inside the tent, naked, trying to be warm, and little stove was on. And at the same time, before the break, I was making a coffee that built up, and the steam went up, and all of a sudden it spilled into my back, and I had a little souvenir for that.
Oh, no. Yeah. Okay. And what about your feet?
Nothing cut.
Yeah.
But the only part that I had a little bit of cut was on my knee because I had to fall down, and that was pretty interesting, challenging for me to be involved. And we planned it, we takes and takes. It went so good.
So the women arrive back to the camp and know that something is wrong. They run to the collapsed tent and find Amakjuak's bloody body. You can see Atuat immediately look to see which brother it is, since it's not immediately apparent, and then she just immediately starts looking for Atanarjuat when she confirms that that's not him. And then there's a shot of her just calling his name into the void. So Atanarjuat is running. We see a shot of his feet running on the ice. His hair is blowing and we hear really heavy breathing. And not only is Atanarjuat able to keep ahead of Oki and his gang barefoot while they're, fully clothed, but he's able to widen the gap between them over time. He falls into the ice-cold water, which again, the actor actually did, and he sees that there's a crack in the sea ice ahead. Oki is convinced that he can't make that jump and that Atanarjuat will be trapped. However, Atanarjuat has a vision of someone standing by the crack and waving, telling him to come this way and jump.
Mauna! 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 Mauna!
Even though his feet are bloody by now, having been cut up by the ice, he makes the jump. And Oki tries to make the jump, but he hesitates and falls into the water. His friends have to pull him out, and Oki decides to come back later with the sled dogs. Meanwhile, we see a man walking around on the land, and we see it's the same man from the vision that Atanarjuat just had before he jumped the crack in the ice. Anyway, this man is out collecting eggs, and then he seems to sense a disturbance in the force. He goes back to his wife and daughter and basically says, "Cook all of these eggs, I think we're going to have company." So this man is actually the same one from the very beginning. This is Qulitalik. Penapak's brother, and he's been living out on this island with his wife and his daughter, who, by the way, are Inuit and Qulitalik. I forgot to tell you that in the last tree update. Oh, and also this actor is Pauloosie Qulitalik, one of the founders of ISUMA Productions. We see Atanarjuat struggling by now. He falls down and collapses. And there's this amazing shot of Qulitalik, Nanook, and Qulitalik looking down at him. It's like kind of one of the more iconic shots in the movie. And by now they've brought him back to their camp. They've rescued him. They've wrapped him in furs. Nanook treats his cut up feet with blubber. And Atanarjuat tells everybody what's going on.
Atanarjuat ang iyo amakdo inokto sakto. Kanay nilokta budlin. Kikuni piyaw na sukabi siya ilang ni.
Qulitalik has heard of Sari's people.
Ukiyo. Sa ukiyo niyat. Kaya magabigi.
And Qulitalik, on lookout duty, spots a dog team heading towards them.
Alana sudah sini tumit asiliyo sumayo. Naniyaw jangan itu tapan ni keluar sang. Kanok likian ay. Ijak tayo nga. Kamu. Siyaw niya pagi.
And expecting trouble, they hide Atanarjuat in the seaweed. So, for context, this island is called Syrak, also called Turn Island, and according to Google Maps, from Igloolik to Syrak, it is 42.6 kilometers in a straight line. So that is just a little longer than a marathon. So Atanarjuat ran over a marathon barefoot and naked in the high Arctic across the sea ice. From the sources I've read, it says that any person that did this would die. They wouldn't make it. So it kind of alludes to the fact that, number one, Atanarjuat was a really fast runner, and number two, there was some kind of supernatural element helping him out here. So back to the island. So Oki and his gang arrive there. Oki aggressively stomps up to Qulitalik and says, "Have you seen anyone?" And Qulitalik says no. Oki and his gang search the tent. They look for blood along the ice from Atanarjuat's feet. But they don't find anything. Oki then takes a leak on the seaweed pile, which we know Atanarjuat is hiding in, and Qulitalik asks Oki if he is Sari's son. This makes Oki suspicious, so Oki pushes him down and seems about to spear him. Until Nanook basically says, "What the hell?" Qulitalik diffuses the tension by offering everyone some eggs to eat, since they cook so many. Oki and gang agree, they have a snack, and then they leave. We hear Oki say that he wants to find Atanarjuat's body. Once it's safe, Qulitalik tells Atanarjuat that he can get up, and Atanarjuat confirms that Oki did in fact pee on him. So some time passes and we see some close-ups of cooking and food prep. Ătaᓈᕐᵝ and her son Kumaglak are back at Sari's camp since they don't really have much of a choice. With Amakjuak being dead and Atanarjuat being missing, there's no one else around really to hunt for them. So she's living with Panapak. We see Pooja bring meat to Panapak from Sari, showing that Panapak's son is providing her with food.
Ninyo, ona tatamahilis sino akong mag... Yan, niranya mo. Kung masyado ko, kangan mo. Atuan, ubati ko. Agatiming organic po i-feeding ada. Unakor. Wakit them.
And Ătaᓈᕝ implies that she knows what Pooja did. Meanwhile, Oki is arguing with Sari. Oki wants to marry Ătaᓈᕝ now that he thinks Atanarjuat is dead.
Kanim. Kanin matpikong nila. Inyo yun nirtuing. Wekaron nirtu. Kanin matpititay di mawing.
Ang nanaising maksuda ka hangin natutubon ninot.
Sari says that they don't know for sure that Atanarjuat is dead and that they don't steal women in this camp, which frustrates Oki. We check back on Atanarjuat, who is healing on the island with Qulitalik and his family. We see a sky shot with birds and realize that Atanarjuat is lying down in a field looking up at the sky. His feet are still healing. And we see all these pretty purple flowers around in the scene, and from what I can tell, this is purple saxifrage, which is a type of flower that is really common in the high Arctic. And you can apparently eat the petals as well as make tea with the leaves and the stems. Purple saxifrage is the official flower of Nunavut. Another thing we notice about a lot of the landscape shots is that there aren't any trees here. So the further north you go, there is generally a point where it's too cold all year for trees to grow. When there are prolonged, extremely low temperatures, the sap inside trees can freeze and then they die. Additionally, the permafrost in these regions, which is when the ground is permanently frozen at certain depths all year round, that can prevent trees from getting their roots very deep. So here's a map in Canada showing roughly the point at which the trees can't grow anymore. So we can see that our location in Igloolik is well beyond that tree line and therefore doesn't have any trees. In an interview with Zacharias Kunuk, he talks about Christian missionaries, and he has a pretty cool line.
When Christianity came, dancing and storytelling was almost banned. How could you preach a burning bush to a culture that has never seen trees?
So yeah, just for context on how the landscape of Igloolik plays into the culture and life of the people there. Anyway, back to the fast runner. So we see Ătaᓈᕝ hand off her baby to another woman. So to me, this implies that she gave birth to her baby, but because she had no one around to provide food, she had to give it away so that the baby could survive. So this is pretty heartbreaking because of the reason she seemingly had to give the baby away. But Inuit traditional adoption is actually really common and was really common at the time as well. Adoptions took place for a lot of reasons traditionally. So if a couple couldn't conceive, they might be given a baby. If a child died, the parents might be given a baby. Traditionally, sometimes grandparents would adopt the firstborn baby of a couple. And this was done to ensure that there was a good balance of children and young people across communities, as well as establishing kinship bonds within these communities. And like we see in the Fast Runner, adoption took place in times of great difficulty as well. So if there was food scarcity, if there was disease, if children were orphaned, if the family got too large. So in these cases, like in Ătaᓈᕝ, a baby that couldn't be supported by one family would be given to another to ensure the baby's and the community's survival. And also, adopted children would always know who their biological parents were, So they just had a really strong network of multiple families throughout their lives. So yeah, traditional adoption was something that was practiced to ensure survival in the Arctic. And back to the Fast Runner, next is a scene that I'm not gonna really show because it's pretty triggering. Essentially, Oki and his gang corner Ătaᓈᕐᵝ, his two sidekicks hold her down, and Oki assaults her. So it seems like Oki sees Ătaᓈᕐᵝ as his now that Atanarjuat is gone. So we go back to Atanarjuat, we see some great shots of the snow and the sun, and the group is talking about how the sea ice is now getting thicker and they can probably get back to Igloolik.
Manutina Raronegama. Ukena, what to Inorutin? Akiumatiun Nata. Kisiane di Tongan, Akiumatiun Nanginam. King would look farming Inungi Cassetero. Between the Kisiane Okaputin.
Qulitalik explains that there are evil spirits around Igloolik that Atanarjuat needs to be concerned about. So not just confronting Oki, there's also spirits around. He says that Atanarjuat will know when he's ready to deal with all of that. Meanwhile, Sauri is out seal hunting, and he's waiting over a seal breathing hole. So you see him bent over, he's looking closely at the water in the breathing hole and waiting for the seals to come up for air. And this is a really iconic pose for seal hunting, being bent over looking down at the hole. And you might be doing that for like hours, waiting on a seal. So this is why Sauri is mad when Oki comes stomping up, because any seals that were going to use that breathing hole would have been scared away by the footsteps by now. So anyway, Oki stabs Sauri, saying that Ătaᓈᕝᵝ is his. I guess he was really mad that Sauri said he couldn't marry her. And as Sauri is dying, Oki calls for help and pretends like he didn't do it. He keeps saying he fell on his knife, which, like, sure. And it seems like he got fake crying lessons from his sister Pooja. Oki is given Sauri's walrus bone necklace, establishing him as the new leader of the community. So let's go back and update our family tree. Sauri is now dead, and Oki is now the new leader, and I've also updated that Ătaᓈᕝᵝ is no longer with us as well. So after Sauri's death, no one is giving Panapak food anymore. So I guess Oki can't be bothered to take care of his own grandma. So Ătaᓈᕝᵝ and Panapak are running low on supplies. Ătaᓈᕝᵝ says that she is desperate enough to go to Oki. Panapak summons her brother Qulitalik's help.
Ani, ikayokto yakakata akong itimito rakata. Tikita yakakarawi ani, ikayokto yakakata ani.
And Qulitalik senses this call over on the island. He lets Atanarjuat know that when he's ready to go back, he's going with him. Atanarjuat says that he's ready. So Qulitalik is a shaman. He does a spell with rabbit's feet. And over on Igloolik, Oki catches a rabbit with his bare hands. And as he's eating the rabbit, there's the tension. We know that this has something to do with Qulitalik's spell. So like, is Oki gonna choke on it? What's gonna happen? What's going on? But then he just falls back and starts sleeping. And then Oki wakes up and says, "Wow, what a great sleep. And also, this is the best rabbit ever."
Arene. Sinitiyak po nga. Tayo man narapiga si tigilak si mangitan. Waganda nga. Ikarakta kaya ka mamarang mo.
So we're left wondering, like, what the hell? What was that all about? What did the rabbit do to him? So Atanarjuat, Qulitalik, Nanook, and Kiguti Karjuk are making the journey back to Igloolik. Atuat sees the dog team approach. And when she realizes that it's Atanarjuat, she runs toward him and gives him this big hug. The reunion is really sweet. And she calls to Qulitalik and Nanook, and she literally says, "I have no idea who you are, but thank you," which I thought was kind of funny. Then we realize what the rabbit magic did when Oki's friend asks him, like, "Oh my god, Atanarjuat's back, what are we gonna do?" And Oki's like, "What do you mean? Atanarjuat's great, he's my friend, I'm glad he's back." So it just made Oki forget about being a dick. So Atanarjuat sees that Atuat is wearing really old, worn-out clothes. He cuts them off of her and presents her with new ones. So this item of clothing in particular is called an amauti. It's a parka. You'll notice it has a baby pouch at the back as part of the hood, so you can carry a baby around. And the one Atanarjuat gives Atuat is especially beautiful. Remember, these clothes were all made for the film using traditional methods that would have been used at the time. We see Pooja hesitate, and then when she sees the new clothes, she decides to run over too, being all like, "Ah, dear husband, I'm so glad you're back." And Atanarjuat cuts off her clothes too. But then he doesn't give her a new amauti, he just kind of leaves her naked. Pooja runs back to Oki and complains to him. But Oki's like, "Atanarjuat's great," and he doesn't care. So once back in the community, we see Atanarjuat build an igloo, but he's spreading water all over the bottom to make a slippery ice floor. Atanarjuat then tells Atuat to wake with Qulitalik and Nanook, and we see Atanarjuat hide what looks like antlers or bones in a hole beside the igloo with a small spear. Atuat goes to Oki and says that Atanarjuat brought meat for everyone, but he wants to give some to Oki and his gang first.
Kisiane okay. Ilisin pingasusigusivulang mitakuyumagar.
We see Atanarjuat chopping up meat outside the igloo. Oki approaches all happy, while his friends are kind of lagging behind, like really sketched out, like what's going on, this is definitely a setup. Also, what's going on with Oki. So they go in the igloo and they eat the meat. Atanarjuat says he needs to go have a pee outside. So he goes and he digs up the spear and the bones. And we find out that the antlers are things that they clamp onto his boots to make them more grippy. So they're crampons. I've worn crampons before because my town sidewalk maintenance sucks during the winter. And they really help you walk on ice without like falling on your face. So this was Atanarjuat's idea too. So we find out that that's why he made the igloo floor extra slippy. So he goes back into the igloo and attacks them. They scramble around and fall because they don't have crampons. Atanarjuat catches Oki and brings down his weapon right next to Oki's face and says, "The killing stops here." Showing he chose mercy instead of revenge. And there's actually a little controversy at the choice in this film, because in most versions of the legend, Atanarjuat kills Oki and the others, basically ridding evil from the community and settling the score. Since they attacked his family, he attacked them. But you know, stories change, and the changes speak to the needs of the people listening to the stories at the time. Elders were consulted extensively when writing the screenplay to make sure that everything was accurate to Inuit life at the time. And none of these elders complained about the updated ending. And as Kunuk is quoted, "Every generation has their version. It was a message more fitting for our times. Killing people doesn't solve anything." And I like that view. Atanarjuat stopped the cycle of killing. And I don't even think I would have blamed him if he did choose to kill Oki, not even out of revenge, but just to like get rid of people causing trouble in the community. Oki got a lot of chances and he kept choosing violence, and in a small community living in a harsh environment, there isn't a lot of buffer room for people causing shenanigans. The community is gathered outside of the igloo after all of this, and the walrus bone necklace is taken off of Oki and given to Apak, establishing her as the new leader of the community. Which I really like that, because I feel like you might be expecting like Atanarjuat to be the new leader, but I like that Apak was chosen instead. So they decide that they need to drive the evil from their community and put an end to this once and for all. Qulitalik calls for the spirits, and the evil shaman from the beginning of the film appears. He grunts like a polar bear. And Qulitalik uses a walrus spirit to kind of battle him. Qulitalik wins, and the evil shaman just disappears out of existence. So the shaman is now defeated, but Apak says, "Wait, we're not done." They've gotten rid of the shaman, but there's still evil in the community.
Ukiyo kasaru atok si marak pavon. Aura taudota. Kapayong niaruk. Suklo. Tungak juang na yuti sa kauning atuteman na tiya ilik ko siya kaman. Ukwayang nang masaw ko katungang Okelo, puyaro. Piungit tumiatuin ng matino katiming nokauta matya.
She calls out Oki and Pooja for leading a life of evil, as well as Oki's sidekick Pitulak and Pakak.
Yang otaka okay ko puyako. Ukwag lupitiora ko pakako.
And she banishes them from the community. So imagine being banished by your own grandma.
Out na kaya kang nerak po si Utilak si Mayon nerlo si Lutamao nga no natin na.
Akka! Ninyo tema na iliw kakang ikarot.
Akka! Ninyo akka!
So in the family tree, we see that Qulitalik is back, Panapak is now the new leader, yay, and the 4 troublemakers have now been exiled. Oh, and also Pooja isn't married to Atanarjuat anymore. And also the evil shaman is dead too. So if we take out all of the banished and dead people that are bad, we don't have any more evil in the community and the balance has been restored. Panapak calls in Atanarjuat and Atuat's son, Kumaglak. And remember, he was named after Panapak's husband, who was killed at the very beginning of the film. And she hears the spirit of her husband, Kumaglak's namesake, in the fire, and the spirit tells her to sing a song. And that is how the film ends. So that's The Fast Runner. I really liked it. I can appreciate how it could be seen as slow, but I'm interested in seeing all the details of daily life. I also think it really helped that I read a bunch about the story and about how the film was made before I watched it. Because even though it spoiled some of the plot points, I don't think I would have been able to follow along as well as I did as if I went into it blind. I'm sure I still probably missed a lot, being someone who's not like super familiar with the culture. I also probably missed a bunch of nuances because I was watching in English subtitles, so I'm sure there was a lot lost in translation. So I found a Nunatsiaq News article from 2001 talking about how the film was screened in Igloolik and it got a big reaction and brought down the house. And that was before they knew that it was going to be such a big deal worldwide. So The Fast Runner premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May 2001, and it won the Camera d'Or, or the Golden Camera Award, which is given to essentially the best film by a new director. And it remains the only Canadian film to have won that award. Canada submitted it to the Oscars that year for Best Foreign Language Film, which is the first film that Canada's done so for a language other than French. But it was disqualified from this category because Inuktitut wasn't technically an official language in Canada, and until 2006, when this rule changed, films for the foreign language Oscar had to be in the official language of the submitting country. So even though Inuktitut was official in Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, but okay. The Fast Runner did win 6 Genie Awards, which are like the Canadian Oscars. It won Best Director, Best Editing, Best Music, Best Screenplay, and Best Motion Picture, as well as the Cloud Jutra Award for Best First Feature. And I have this other list of awards that the film won internationally. I'll scroll by it now because it's pretty long. And Zacharias Kunuk has gone on to have a very impressive career, making more than 30 films that have been screened at film festivals, theaters, museums, and art galleries. Kunuk has 2 honorary doctorates for his work, one from Trent University and the other one from Wilfrid Laurier, and he was named an Office of the Order of Canada in 2015. And in this CBC interview, I like how Kunuk doesn't really see the awards as like a big deal.
It was, I thought it was normal. I thought every Canadian came to Cannes and won something. And just part of their flow.
Wow.
That's what I thought.
And what was that experience like for you?
I had a good experience call from Zach from Cannes to Igloolik. I was in the office and he ended up calling me, "We won." And I said, "What are we trying to win?" And all of a sudden, Zach said, "We won the film in Cannes." Oh, okay. I wasn't really that focused for trying to win and all that, and he made it happen.
It's great that the awards probably got more people to watch the film, but the important thing is making the movie that he wanted to make and depicting Inuit culture in such an authentic way.
We're part of this world. We're part of Canada. That's all. And it's a big country, just up there. That's what we...
And it's important to note that Inuit are still here. They're not some historical people that existed in history and then vanished. So you see that in the behind-the-scenes footage shown during the credits of The Fast Runner, there's people in modern clothes. You see motorboats. The actor who plays Oki is wearing a leather jacket and headphones. Oh, and here's this really stressful story Kunuk tells of him having a sled full of camera equipment that is sinking into the sea.
And we're trying. We almost drowned my skidoo.
Yeah.
I just started sinking, but he was driving, and I'm on the sled being pulled because I'm with all the camera equipment. And the skidoo started
sinking,
carving through the ice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm going through that. And then he speed up his throttle and got up.
And you know, Inuit culture can still embrace like Western modern culture while still remaining strong. People know what a phonograph is. So I hope you liked this analysis. I've never done an analysis of a film like this before, so I hope I did it justice. If you liked this, consider leaving a like and, you know, even subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this. I think I'm at 44 subscribers now, which is pretty exciting to me that there are 44 people that like these videos enough to subscribe. So thank you so much for watching.
Everything's coming up Millhouse.
I also got a lot of really sweet and supportive comments on my last video about the high Arctic relocation. So thank you. That was really nice, because sometimes I feel like I'm like putting a video out into the void and I have no idea if people will think it's good. So it was nice to see that it was actually meaningful to people, and even nicer that you let me know that. So again, thank you for watching. Yeah, I appreciate comments, especially if you would like to let me know what you'd like to see next from me. I have a few ideas I'm going to work away at, but I'm open to suggestions. But yeah, I like to really make sure that I'm researching the topics well and putting that research together carefully. So it might take a while to get the next video out, but I'll get there. But yeah, I'll aim to get it out as best I can. And if you've made it this far, thank you again, and I wish you all the best.